Here we are back with our second video, creating a market maker bot on Genius Yield with Jamie. He's going to walk me through the process in a moment. We're going to share his screen. He's going to talk us through what we need to get ready. And so that should be helpful. If anybody is interested in creating a market maker bot through Genius Yield, you can go ahead and follow along. We might have some troubleshoots that we run into, but that's all part of this series, right? This is not going to be the last shebang. We're not going to end up with a full market maker bot right now, but we're going to kick the can down the road a little bit. And so, Jamie, do you want to take it from here and say anything before we begin, or what? What you got going on? How you doing?
We're good. We're good over here. So this video, I think, is best if we go through some of the prerequisites, if you will, to getting it set up, because I think there's a implicit understanding of computers and software that is required to do a lot of these things. And so the goal of this too is to bridge that barrier as well. And so someone that maybe isn't as tech savvy, maybe doesn't know anything about version control or Docker images, can hop on and do it. So those terms we'll walk through, we'll talk about. And so I think that's sort of where this video is going to go. And if you want to pull up my screen, I can do that.
Perfect.
Go through the softwares that we'll be looking at that you need to do it. So right now I have Visual Studio Code open. That's what's called an IDE, an integrated development environment, which is just a fancy term for, kind of the place you code. You can see I have a bunch of files on my left side. Those are just things I've been working on personally, or the repository for the code that we're going to be looking at. And another term, repository.
Wow, this is called Visual Studio Code.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So there's other ones for coding as well. Like one that's Python exclusive is called PyCharm. There's Visual Studio Code. There's Spider. It's just the way that you interact with the computer and specifically write your code. So the first thing I wanted to, go through is the software that you need to do some of these things. So I just showed you Visual Studio Code. I'm on their website right now. And This is what it would look like if I had a full project open at the moment. And you can see you can code in any language. They have extensions, so you can work with your language. And so you need this in order to, or this is the one I would recommend if you're going to do this market maker bot. And if you go to Genius Yield themselves, this is their GitHub, which is where their code's stored. You can see they have multiple projects here as well too, and the market maker one is available here. And so pretty much all the things that we're going to discuss in this are getting to the place where we can start doing these things. So first, the general assumption is that you have an IDE. So I would recommend, again, this one, download it for Windows. I'm on a Windows computer. You can download it for Mac as well.
Okay. IDE. What is IDE? What is that?
It's Integrated Development Environment.
Development Environment. Great. Okay.
Yeah, this is just one of those IDEs. And again, this is one I would recommend since you can use multiple languages. And so I have it downloaded, as I mentioned, and
Fantastic.
This is what it'll look like. The next step, once you get the IDE set up and, it gives you kind of like get started, kind of a tutorial around it a little bit. The next thing that you'll need is to download Git. Git is the actual underlying software, and so Git is where is a version control software. So anytime something's modified, it's tracked. So that's how software development works, really. Like everything's tracked, anything's modified, it's tracked. And so this is also a must to do this. So you can see there's download links here. So the next step is downloading that for your respective, computer.
Okay.
And whether it's 64 or 32-bit. And so that's the second one, Git. And the reason why that's important is if you go to the GitHub, which is same name. So you can see there's a git clone command. So the underlying assumption is you know how to clone the repository. And
Okay.
I think that's where a lot of people are probably lost right now is like, okay, what does git clone? And you see this command here and you say, what the heck is this? And
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
right, and that's a fair thing if you don't understand it. A lot of this is working in your shell, which is what's considered, or your terminal, which is, again, if you look down here, and I have Visual Studio Code open right now, this is your terminal down here. So one of the commands in there is cd, which is change directory. So that's another thing that like is required to do any of these things. And so the thing that I'm trying to stress right now is get the software and then we can walk through it. So again, I'll go back to Git. So I have this downloaded already, and the way you can check if it's downloaded is you go to like your terminal or your shell and you type in Git. So I'm typing it in Git down here, and you can see all the commands that pop up. If you don't have it, it's going to throw something else like an error. And
okay,
you can also check what version it is by doing this command, git dash version. So I'm on whatever this version is. And so that's the second software you need to get updated or installed. And then the third one is Docker. And we mentioned it in the first video. So like understanding Docker is also kind of an implicit thing. And so I'm on Docker's website for Docker Desktop. You just search Docker Desktop to get to it. And so you can see right here, there's 5 different options. Get it for whatever computer you have, Mac, Windows, Linux. And then once you start that, you'll see something like this. And it's pretty much the best way I can describe it is you'll see nothing here at the moment.
Okay. And these are in order, right? Like Visual Studio first, that IDE, then Git, then Docker.
Yeah, I mean, there's no you're just downloading the software at this point before we do anything fun.
Okay.
So
nice.
get those software set up, and then so I think you kind of need VS Code first, but no specific order. So
Code. Awesome, man. This is really, really exciting. All of it looks completely foreign to me. But I can imagine like when I'm talking people through like some of these dexes or, I'm like, get on Tap Tools or check out TradingView and look at MinSwap or something. It's like, what the heck? And I'm looking at it so much that it just feels so natural to me. And so right away at first glance, when you just showed me everything you showed me, I'm like, what? But I know that if I continue to look at it and go through the process of actually downloading that stuff on the computer and then, having it there in front of me, then it will just be, through repetition, I'll begin to understand. So yeah, I mean, this video is really for somebody who, might just go out and get a computer and think about doing this from scratch. All the way up to somebody who really understands a little bit of the code. Okay, so nice. So we're going to go back to your screen and just continue on because I think there's a lot of information here packed into it to what we got going on before we get to the fun stuff, like you said.
The next thing I'm going to go through is once you have the software. So you download those 3 things. Now what the heck do you do? And so on my screen, what I'm going to do is go back to the GitHub. And again, I have instructions for how you set it up in what's called the README on the page. And so it shows you the minimum requirements, blah, blah, blah. And then so the first thing you need to do is to get this set up at all is you clone the repository. And what does that mean? Cloning is just taking something that someone else created, like in the GitHub, and you're cloning it or placing it onto your computer.
Okay.
And so the first thing I'm going to do is get that. So now that you have Git, what you do is you check to make sure Git's up and running. So again, I have Git. If I type Git, you'll see all the commands that you could possibly use. You probably use like 20% of them realistically. And once you have Git installed, once you have, you're working in VS Code right now, and you have Docker set up. Docker will come and play a little bit later, but initially, so the first thing I'll do is go back to the GitHub, and at the top of the page, there's a code green button, and if you hover over it, this is the one way you can do it. Is there's an HTTPS link. You can see clone using the web URL. So I'm going to copy that and go back to go to VS Code, and I'm going to do, you can see that's the link right there.
Yes.
Nothing. So I'm going to do git clone that link, and you'll see a couple commands come through. What I did was I made a test directory here, and I pasted it in that test directory.
Okay.
So I'm reading it. So what I'm going to do is cd is the one command I have on their thing. I'm going to switch my directory to that new directory I just made, and then you can see all the files that are in there now. So this had nothing in it before. Now it's full of, and everything that's in here that you see is what is right here on my screen now. I just copied it pretty much. Cloning is just copying it over.
Okay, and that's everything that Genius Yield put up in GitHub as far as what is involved with the Market Maker bot.
Right. So you can see, there's multiple people working on this. And GitHub is a place where people can also report issues. So there's issues that people are constantly trying to resolve. And These are the ones that are closed. These are the ones that they're working on right now.
Okay.
And so again, what I did is I just copied this directory, or copied all these files over. And why that matters is because that's how you run it locally on your own machine. And so again, I'll go back to the GitHub, and we'll go back to what I was showing. So we cloned it now because we have Git, we have the ability to clone. We went over into this Market Maker folder, and then this is copying an environment template, which includes stuff like your seed phrase and stuff like this, other configs that you have. So I'm not going to talk about this at the moment. I'm going to talk about the Docker stuff. So the Docker stuff is, all the stuff in here is the code in here is to build an image. And that image is what runs in this thing called a container. And that's what I was showing right here. So these are different containers I had. This is a container I had for running the bot 2 months ago, I believe, was when I ran it.
Okay, yeah.
So,
I remember you mentioning the containers in the first video, and it just, I was like, I didn't quite understand that, but just keep going. Yeah,
so I'm going to pretend and just that I have set this stuff up. And there's going to be, it's not going to run, but I'm going to set it up as if it's going to run. And then, maybe in the next video, we can go into the variables and all the other things and actually run it.
Okay.
And so the first thing is dealing with this command. So Docker compose. Sometimes you have to install this command on your computer. And maybe we can talk about it in the next video when we actually run the Docker image correctly. But in VS Code, I'll run a Docker compose pull. So the reason why I did this is to showcase, you can see there's a seed phrase variable is not set, defaulting to a blank string. Here, I'll make it bigger. And then there's also collateral UTX variables not set, defaulting to. These need to be populated, and I haven't populated them yet. So once you have the software installed, VS Code, Git, and Docker, I would recommend following through the steps that we just went through. Install it or whatever. Create a new directory. I just made one called test, and then you clone it. And then once it's cloned, you can test this out, see if Docker is working correctly. This is now the next step where we're going to have to go in and populate those values with the wallet we're going to use, the collateral we're going to use, and the seed phrase. Obviously, we're not going to show the seed phrase on camera, but these are the three things that are needed, and you can see the variables must be specified in this .env file, which is an environment file. So everything else in this environment or this directory can work with it.
Okay.
So
wow.
There's a lot there, and I think the best way to explain a lot of these things is just going through it. And like you said, repetition is key. And
Right.
some of these things that are on their GitHub, as well as the things I'm saying, you kind of just have to see it sometimes to understand it.
For sure.
And I think the last thing we can talk about briefly is, again, I don't want to get into the intricacies of how Docker works and the things that most people probably care less about. I think the things that are more valuable is like once you set it up, what happens. And on my screen now, I'm showing, again, a GitHub, and I'm going to go to the sample market maker bot config. So what you'll see, I'll zoom in again, is Genius Yield have on their GitHub provided a sample of what you can throw in here. So obviously your mnemonic phrase, your wallet, this thing, a path to an S key, which actually maybe is worth going over today.
Okay.
And then your stake address. This is how often it's run. I think this is like 2 minutes. It's in microseconds. And these are all the conditions and things that you would change in order to do your strategy. So you can
really?
have a completely different strategy by changing these values, for example.
Okay.
And
I see.
These are all the things. And then down here's the other token that you're going to be trading with. In this case, this is the address for Genius Yield token.
Okay. It's like the policy ID for it.
And then the last thing too is you need to get this token, and they have the documents right here. I'll pull that open. You need a paid subscription for this. It won't work if you don't have the paid subscription. So on their page, you'll see, I'll go to the pricing tab. There is a free tier, but the problem with that is you can't get market price feeds, which is the thing you need.
Okay.
So that's the reason why you need that. And then on top of that, once you create a key, with them, you need the mainnet key, which is the one thing that's finally good is on the GitHub they finally expressed that you need a mainnet key from them. I don't know.
Yeah, so that was like that was an initial sort of barrier where you needed a mainnet key,
hiccup.
even though you were in the testnet.
Yeah, I don't think they listed that properly, which was confusing because there's no one else that knows this. So yeah, the two things I'll wrap up with. There is a how to create your own market maker bot, but done by Lars. But I think the problem is a lot of the things that we're talking about in here are prerequisites before you even watch that video, and so that's why it's important to talk about it now.
Sweet. That's great. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, wow. So that's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah, a lot to digest.
Yeah, it's really exciting for me to think about it because it doesn't seem that crazy. I mean, if you just download those softwares like Visual Studio, got the Git, Docker, it's not like I necessarily need to understand all of it as intensely as I would need to.
No.
And then it's almost just like to set up a market maker bot would help me learn a lot about this. Because all those terminals and stuff like that. I mean, I'm just the type of person when I use a computer, I just use it as like a regular. I never go into a terminal. So
right.
I'm sure that most people are maybe like me. Maybe watching this video, you might be more, developer in the developer world. But no, that was super helpful, man. And so what you're saying is the next time that we get together with another one of these videos, we're going to actually just kind of like move through what it would be like to set up one of those market maker bots. Right. Now, what about the seed phrase? Because people go nuts about that. It's like, oh my gosh, you have to put your seed phrase in, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the process. If you're going to be, using your wallet, you need to give it access to be able to trade. And so that's part of the process. I mean, again, none of this is obviously financial advice, and none of the stuff that is on Genius Yield. You could lose money. You could theoretically lose money. Obviously, you make a strategy that makes money is the thing that you would love.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of this is trial and error too. And so, yeah, I think that's something that people could be concerned about. I mean, you could also just use a different wallet, perhaps start small.
Just like create a separate wallet. I mean, that's what I would think. I would
Yeah, just make one for this.
create a separate wallet for that. Yeah. Awesome. That's fantastic. Wow. I mean, that's pretty cool. You know, it seems super straightforward, and you could do this on an Apple. You could do this on a Windows. It's like you don't need a special computer, right?
Nope, they specify the requirements that you would need to run this. And
Fantastic.
the requirements are not that restrictive.
Cool.
So most people that have a computer today should be able to do this. You probably, I think the restrictor is enough RAM. I think they specify on there that it's might be at 8 gigs of RAM. I would recommend to have like at least 16 gigs of RAM, just in general, not related to this, but that's just another discussion.
Cool. Yeah. So if you're really thinking about doing something like this, you got to do a little bit of research. You got to check into it, because this, I think, is something substantial. And I know that Genius Yield has a lot of things in their roadmap. Options. You and I were talking yesterday about options.
Yep.
Genius Yield is making a great case to bring options to the decentralized world of order book dexes. So that'll be fun and exciting. And this is kind of like a beginning to work within Genius Yield. Create a market maker bot for some tokens that you might be interested in. I could just understand that there's a few other tokens that I'm thinking about. Maybe if this is easy to set up for like the Gens token with ADA or whatever, I mean, maybe if I have some extra OrcFax laying around or something like that, it could also be in just an advantageous sort of passive way to collect some rewards. So awesome. Okay. So I think this concludes this video. Is there anything else that you forgot to talk about, or before we get into actually just like creating the market maker bot?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I would leave off this video, kind of a key takeaway, is you gotta have to try. You can't just expect it's gonna magically work. You gotta put a little bit of effort in. You gotta be just a genuinely curious person that wants to try to figure this out. I think you'll be rewarded in the end if you do, but it just can't be. There's an element of you can't just spoon feed this to someone. You have to try to, watch this video again, watch Dr. Lars' video. You have to do a little bit of work. It's not going to just be clicking a button and it doesn't just make you money.
Yeah, totally. Right. That's good. You got to put some effort and some elbow grease into it. So
100%.
That was great. Thank you so much for this. It was very enlightening for me, and hopefully for some viewers there watching. So we'll see you all in the next step of the phase, where we will actually take some actions into actually set up a market maker bot and see how it does. Right. So Stay tuned. All right. Cheers.